to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So item 1 would be distribution of the draft employee handbook. So, John, you want to take that on, or?
Sure. Sure. For several years, the village has been working on creating an employee manual. There is a predecessor document that this is largely based on. Most organizations now have handbooks of this nature and provide them to employees upon entering into an employer-employee relationship. It deals with the employment expectations and obligations, what the employer expects of the employee, and what the employee may expect from the employer in terms of benefits and things of that nature. As you know, a significant number of the village staff are represented by collective bargaining agents, both the PBA and CSEA. Many aspects of the document do not relate to those employment arrangements. In those cases, there are collective bargaining agreements in place, and those would be controlling as opposed to the handbook itself. There are village staff who are not part of bargaining groups, and so therefore this agreement would address those situations specifically. It deals with things like workplace violence, ethical considerations and expectations, use of village equipment, such as the internet and tools and equipment and vehicles and things of that nature. There is a section that deals with use of village vehicles, reimbursement for travel expenses, and educational conferences and things of that nature as well. And there's typical policies like sexual harassment prohibitions, smoking prohibitions on village property. And so it's a comprehensive document. We've worked with a consultant, public sector consultants in development of a large portion of it. A large portion of the document also is basically taking policies that have been enacted by this board and predecessor boards over the years and consolidating them into a single document. It is a living document in the sense that as soon as it is adopted, hopefully it will be adopted, but as soon as it's adopted, it's likely to become out of date because there'll be some new action taken, a new policy considered, or something of that nature. But it is, in my view, it's a great tool for both management and the staff, and provides a great resource where people can look at the policies that the village has and find them in one place, as opposed to strewn out through many documents that have been adopted over the last 10, 20, 30 years. It's been prepared in consultation between myself and the manager, and in some respects. In other respects, it's simply consolidating information that was already in place. It's been shared with with the department heads and other village staff. We're looking for input from board members and others, including staff. We're looking for people to look at it with a fresh eye, because they'll see things that may have been overlooked by others. So input's important. Once your review and analysis and hopeful adoption occurs, it would then go to back to the public sector consultants, and they would produce a final document, which would then be distributed amongst all village staff. And there are certain sections that affect volunteers. The village has volunteers in many cases that assist us in performing village work. Many of the policies that are in there affect volunteers as well as staff. And by staff, I mean paid staff or elected officials. So we hope that you find it valuable, useful, and that it's ultimately adopted in some form.
I'd like to suggest that we have a workshop on it. I see this item 4 is to schedule workshops, but since we're talking about this, I have a date in mind, September 15th. What does that look like for anybody? At 3:30?
It's a Tuesday.
That's fine to me.
Yeah, I can do that day.
Can't-
I can do earlier today, but
Brad?
Well, if I may, I'm wondering, is this the reason for this special meeting, this employee handbook? If so, I don't see the urgency to call a special meeting.
Well, that's one item, but the important issue is the next item on the agenda, which we'll get to in just a minute.
And this employee handbook is in existence now in some format? There's just been a few changes?
There've been, I guess I would say, yes, it's been in existence in a different format. There've been a significant number of changes, but many of them are structural in nature in the sense that policies that didn't exist have been incorporated into that document or were adopted after the existing document.
do you know approximately when the last handbook was even looked at or updated by chance?
Personally, off the top of my head, I can't answer that question accurately. I don't know.
Okay.
Sorry.
I'm just wondering why this, we have a meeting scheduled for next Tuesday. I wonder why this couldn't have waited until then. Maybe I see this other thing could, maybe not wait. And then if we're scheduling one for the following week, then we'll have one the following week. Are you suggesting?
What do you
Are you suggest? I'm suggesting we table this and look at it at our next regular meeting.
That's all we're doing.
We should have
Receiving
a
it.
separate workshop on it, in my opinion.
Well, I don't disagree, Ron, but I'm just saying there's no urgency on this. We can table it until, and bring it up at the next
regular
meeting.
meeting really is not a good time to do this, would you think? Or,
Take too long.
I mean, we want a dedicated workshop for this, wouldn't you? Wouldn't you think?
Well, that'd be great, but why can't we schedule the next, at the next meeting, schedule a workshop for this? I don't, you want to have a meeting every week this month?
Do-
Well, we're
We have a
here.
scheduled meeting next Tuesday, right?
What's the difference if we schedule a workshop today or next Tuesday?
Yeah. I don't
Is
get
the
it.
15th okay?
That does work for me.
Not for George.
Doesn't work for you?
Yes, sir.
We could have a couple on this too. Gotta read this whole thing.
Yeah, Tuesday's done. Tuesday, what Tuesday is it?
So what's your pleasure on a workshop? Wait, do it now? I mean, we could probably pick the same date, aren't we? Or you got a different date? You
No.
can be here?
Pick a date.
Want everybody here?
Okay.
Wednesday, George? Is Wednesday work for
Wednesday
you,
will work
16th?
fine. Wednesday's fine.
16th?
The 16th done? Is that the 16th, what date are we talking
Wednesday, the 16th, we're looking
That's good.
about?
I'm not sure. We also don't have another board member here, so we can't check his schedule.
Do you know what time he normally gets off work?
I don't have any idea.
I got me too.
at. Well, I'll tell you what, why don't we just table it for today? I mean, we don't need to play
That's fine.
round and round with this here. We'll table it,
Amen.
it is what it is.
Okay, so we'll move on to item 2. Code enforcement, Sister City. Yeah.
Want to read the resolution?
You have a resolution for this?
Yeah.
Okay. Have a resolution, please.
Be resolved that the clerk treasurer is hereby authorized to transfer the funds indicated below, 42,000 to 1230, from 1230.440 contracted services for village manager to 1619.142 code enforcement officer provisional, and $3,000 from the 1230.440 village manager contracted services to 6410.500 Sister City program.
Okay. Okay, this.
So now you want to vote for first and second?
Well, I'll just discuss it for a second here. This, and the importance of this is that we hired a code enforcement officer beginning tomorrow, and learned that we need to create a separate line item for that purpose. And so what we're moving is from contracted services into a specific line item for the personnel item. The second piece is, again, from contracted services, and it's for the Sister City program. We've learned that the mayor of Nakagawa and a contingent of his village will be coming over to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the signing of the Sister City Charter with Nakagawa. And so the Sister City Committee is planning a welcome and an event in recognition of that signing and a rededication of the Sister City Agreement. And so that's why we've done this. The urgency, of course, was for to properly transfer the money from one line item to the other, and the Sister City program as well. So these are in the budget. It's not any change in the budget other than a transfer, which, as you know, is required.
Now, just a quick question here. Why wouldn't Bob Young's item just move over for the new hiree? Why does this have to go through this process?
Well, we have to establish a separate line item for the code person. And in order to accomplish the hiring of the code person, he's going to come on part-time initially and then change over to full-time. In the meantime, we have to and have agreed to keep Bob on as working on one of the major projects, two of the major projects that we have going on now because of his familiarity with those. And while the new code person is in training, we need Bob as a backup.
Okay,
as
so
well.
Bob is still in his item right now then?
Yes, also part-time on, coming in on Mondays.
Okay, very good, thank you.
And he's a technical backup person until that provisional gets not the provisional, but the training, New York State training requirement is met. Okay?
Okay, very good.
I don't have the budget with me right now, but what was the line item for code enforcement officer in the budget? How much was that?
For the existing,
Yes.
more or less 42,000.
Okay, so are we paying somebody part-time, 42,000? And paying Bob for his services?
No. The 42,000 is to make the move so that when he becomes full-time, which will be in the near future, that line item is already there. If it's unexpended, of course, it's like any other line item, it just goes back into the general budget.
And at that time, then Bob's services will
Yes.
terminate? And at that time, what will the salary for that code enforcement officer be?
On an annual basis would be 52,000.
So we're raising the salary $52 or $10,000 for that position.
Yes.
Okay. And this is going to require a vote on this as a resolution. I'm on record as being opposed to this. I think this is a perfect service that we could look at shared services with. So I won't be voting in favor of this for that reason.
And Bob helps out on a part-time basis and hourly basis, correct? So it's not his full salary.
Correct.
What's the, do we have a value of the permits that Bob is working on with larger structures?
Well, one that comes to the top of my head is a $34,000 permit.
And there's another one too.
It's, well, we don't know what that's going to be because we don't know the exact scope of the project.
Okay, I'm not gonna ask what it is.
Right.
So there is income coming to offset this?
Yes.
You care to talk
And that's
about-
that's a big project, but we also have ongoing with permits
Mhm.
and fire inspections. Fire inspections are annual for larger public assembly places, every 3 years for lesser retail.
There's an income coming in on that too?
Yes, yeah, there's a fee for each of those, for
It pays a
permits.
lot of the salary of that person.
It does, yes.
Did you care to elaborate on any other communities with code or?
Well, we had covered this before in our continuation of a meeting, so, yeah, I'll just recap. What we learned was that the town of Horseheads pays more than this figure, and I learned last week that that will increase by $6,000 in January. We had very good, qualified code people that would not accept the position at 48. So that was another consideration. And finally, the dearth of code enforcement people is very, very small, and several of those are retiring. So it's a very, very good market if you're a code enforcement person. It's hard for towns and villages to fulfill that requirement. So that's where we are. And with respect to Trustee Vital's comment, we did have a shared service for many years, as Code Officer Bob Young pointed out, was not successful and simply didn't work. So, we've moved on from that.
In code enforcement, property maintenance, I think we all know, is number one concern of people in Horseheads.
As is code enforcement, yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
And to town of Horseheads and sharing, they're pretty busy in the city. At Minor talks about that, but they're really cut short. I had Minor talks with the city of Elmira, and they are, of course, using the town code enforcement officers to train, and they're really kind of way behind too.
Yeah. That contract, by the way, was $40,000
Okay.
part-time.
Yeah,
Mr. Mayor?
yes, sir.
I believe I asked what would happen to our code enforcement officer if we hired a new code enforcement officer, and we eventually did go with a plan that you described, a countywide plan, shared services for code enforcement.
Now,
They
wait a
would.
minute, I didn't just mention about countywide code enforcement.
I believe you said that they would be probably hired by them or folded in with that
That was a
operation.
discussion a long time ago.
That was a discussion?
Yeah.
Okay, so.
It could be a possibility. I'm not saying it's going to happen right now, and I'm looking at it.
Okay, well, I was just bringing that up because if I heard correctly, you're saying that they're not, it's not a good experience. We didn't have a good experience with the town of Horseheads doing that, but you're saying that we could fold this person in with the town of Horseheads code eventually? If that was the county plan?
No.
Well, I must have misunderstood you then, I'm sorry.
Okay. What's your druthers, folks?
Move forward.
Your motions on the floor?
Yep.
So moved.
Roll call, please.
Trustee Schwartz?
Aye.
Trustee Polanski?
Aye.
Trustee Lytle?
No.
Mayor Zi-
Aye. Number 3? Well, do you want a resolution on that right now, or you want to talk about it first?
Yeah, that's the,
We're ready out of the sequence, but
that's-
I can
we won't
address-
be the next meeting.
I can address that, Your Honor. What we have is a situation where we discovered through a recent survey that a portion of the village vacuum building encroaches on lands that are part of the village parking lot near the intersection of John Street and South Main Street. Approximately half of a foot is on, of the building is on village property. Correspondingly, about half a foot of the building to the north, the property I'm referring to is owned by David Quinn. Approximately half a foot of the building to the north of that, which we think of as the Masonic building, is on the Quinn property, and so forth. So it continues basically in that entire block that there is this aberration where some of these buildings are essentially encroaching on buildings or lands typically to the south. And that became evident recently when the Quinn property was surveyed. There have been a number of instances where this occurs throughout the village. We've had other buildings that are encroaching on street right-of-ways or easement areas and so forth that the village has. Mr. Quinn is asking that the village permit the continued maintenance of the building where it is. The other alternative would be for him, for example, to initiate an Article 15 proceeding on the basis that the building has been there as long as it has, and it's sort of a squatter's rights kind of a situation, and seek to acquire legal title to the property. He's not trying to do that. He basically wants an easement that would allow for the building to stay where it is, recognize the boundary line that is shown on the survey, which shows the encroachment. He would provide insurance, and this is typical of what we've required of others in the past. He would provide an insurance policy that would name the village as additional insured should somebody become injured on the village property. For example, a brick falls off of his building and hits something that's on village property, then his insurance coverage would be available for that type of an injury. We've charged in the past when the village has granted these types of documents, the village has charged a nominal amount for it, somewhere between $100 and $150 or $50, that kind of thing. And we've also had various village department heads look at the situation to make sure that the village's interests aren't being materially and adversely affected. In other words, is this area that's encroached on critical to some village need? Is there a utility line there or things of that nature? So in any event, the resolution, if adopted, would call for the situation to be investigated by appropriate village personnel to determine whether or not there's an adverse condition, and report back to the manager. And if the conclusion is that it's not detrimental to the long-term village interests, then it would authorize the granting of this license. And as I said, it's not changing the boundary lines, it just allows the building to continue where it is, and it requires of the property owner that the property owner provide the village with insurance coverage. And should the building ever be removed by destruction or demolition or something of that nature, then the boundary line as depicted on the survey would have to be honored and respected going forward.
So then, going down the road, you mentioned this Article 15. Would this resolution then transfer over to future ownership of?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
It would have to come up for issue every time that transfer?
If there is an agreement in place, it would be binding on successors in the sign. So essentially, if the property transfers hands, then the new owner of that property would be burdened by the same obligations, which is like the continuation of insurance coverage and so forth. And also would get the same benefit of that agreement going forward, that meaning that the building doesn't have to be removed and so forth. In my view, it's something that if an Article 15 proceeding were pursued by the owner, more than likely the village would end up losing because of the adverse possession rights and claims that this property owner would have since the building's been there for as many decades as it has.
Thank you.
We've done this before, at least once, I know on South Main, and, seems like there was one other.
You've done it several times. These things crop up and,
Yeah, that's right.
you know, what happens is that when properties are surveyed, as they are more and more frequently all the time, these kind of aberrations become evident and you have to find ways to deal with them. Sometimes they're minor and sometimes they're not.
So this wasn't caught on the last sale?
No,
Okay.
not to my knowledge. I don't know that this property's ever been surveyed before.
Okay, any other questions?
By the way, let me mention that I'm assisting the property, the purchaser of the property, so I'm aware of it independently in that respect. Just so that you're all clear that that is part of the source of my knowledge regarding the situation. Because the property is under contract.
So it has to do this before it sells?
Not necessarily, but it would certainly facilitate the sale of the property. I mean, it is a lawyer would call it a cloud on the title to the property.
Motion?
Resolution. Gotta read it. Not you.
Resolution, please.
Ready? Whereas Village of Forest Hills is the owner of a municipal parking lot located on South Main Street near its intersection with John Street. And whereas the village is informed and believes that such parking lot borders property commonly known as 117 South Main Street, Forest Hills, New York. And whereas the village has been provided with a survey map of lands of David S. Quinn, 117-119 South Main Street, Forest Hills, New York, Quintier's Land Surveying Job Number 15281, dated July 28, 2015, from which it appears that building and gravel improvement 117-119 South Main Street encroach upon the village's parking lot. And whereas the village has been requested to grant permission for the encroachments to remain in their current location. And whereas it is the policy of the village, when such encroachment exists, to consider granting a terminal easement for the maintenance of such encroachments, if it has been determined that same do not materially impair the public safety and operations of the village. Now therefore be resolved that village manager Walt Kurtz will cause the existence and locating of the above noted encroachments to be investigated by the appropriate village staff, and in the event that such staff report that they foresee no material adverse effects to the village from the continued maintenance of such encroachments, he is authorized to sign a terminal easement and such other documents as may be necessary to permit the continued maintenance of such encroachments.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
I have one question, if I may. Aren't documents like this typically signed by the mayor?
Actually, no.
Okay, thank you.
Trustee Schwartz?
Aye.
Trustee Kalawski?
Aye.
Trustee Lytle?
Aye.
Mayor Ziegler?
Aye. So that concludes the business. Just a point of clarification, Brad, and going back through my memory. On code enforcement, there has been many talks, and I probably have led the way in looking at anything to help alleviate the cost to the taxpayers. And in the Rams meeting, we have talked about anything and everything, including could we possibly merge or share services in code enforcement. When Bob Young came online, I said, just me, looking for ways to help him make efficiency, and I mentioned this to the town, could we locate his office in the town so that he had a support staff, there was a secretary there, he wouldn't have to sit here until 10 o'clock And that's as far as that went. Code enforcement will be probably looked at, as everything is gonna be looked at. But it tends to not be the priority thing that would immediately save us or anybody money. I know Big Flats is kind of, not really in favor of sharing their officers. And as I say, the town of Horseheads is kind of embattled with using theirs and being semi-short-staffed. So is it something that is going to be looked at? I think anything has to be looked at. But to say, wait, well, we want to just do this now, you can't. There has to be a plan and a detailed plan in committees and discussions. But in the future, I don't think you'll find much of anything on the table of shared services. How many will be adopted? I don't know. Will everything be adopted? No. Some don't make sense. So just to clarify, so you have your, the information, we've discussed it, okay?
I believe it came up at our budget meeting, when I asked the questions about what we would do and why we couldn't look at shared services for that line item. I'll have to go back and listen to the record, but I'm
Well,
pretty
just
sure it
for
was.
detail, because you were
Okay.
saying that I said this, I said that, and
Okay.
for that record. So we can have a discussion anytime you want on it, really, or anything else. I'm open. So, motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Carried.